I called up the county executive of Westchester County, and I got his assistant, and I explained what we were going through with the Sustainable Communities Initiative and my concerns, and I asked, does this resonate with you or anyone on your end? And his response was, oh yes, and I'm sure the county executive himself will want to talk to you. I know he's tied up all day, but if he's busy, I'm sure he will have someone call you. And his chief of staff called me within an hour. And since then, I've spoken with him 3 or 4 times, and we've exchanged quite a few emails. And the whole basis of this lawsuit is that, and this was settled, they made it clear to me that this was settled with the previous county executive, that the current county executive, during the time of the settlement negotiations, was completely against all of this. But that since they did settle, they had an obligation and they were following through with the terms of the settlement. And the settlement was for $51.6 million to build 750 units in so-called eligible or mostly white communities over 7 years. Now, I just read that off of this. This is an op-ed from the county executive. Now, the county executive said, and this is one of his comments in here, it says, HUD's approach is to unilaterally move the goalposts in the middle of the game. Its technique is to repeatedly reject a routine document called an analysis of impediments. Okay? The settlement calls on the county to submit an AI that's, quote, acceptable to HUD. The purpose of the AI is to outline obstacles to fair housing choice, which the county has done. Prior to the settlement, HUD has never rejected an AI by the county, but now we are up to 5 rejections. HUD is clearly using the AI to try to expand the terms of the settlement from a straightforward stipulation to build housing into an open-ended utopian integration order, which HUD then plans to use as a model across the country. The fundamental problem is the facts. The law, economics, plain common sense, and the settlement itself don't support HUD's ambitions. Now, just to put all this in perspective, Westchester County, according to the most recent 2010 census, is one of the most diverse places to live in the United States. If Westchester is the 4th most diverse county in New York, behind Queens, Brooklyn, the Bronx, tied with Manhattan and ahead of Staten Island. If Westchester were a state, it would be the 7th most diverse in terms of Hispanic representation and 14th most in terms of African American representation. So he went on to say that because of the demographic data, which states that Westchester County is 70% Caucasian, that they are considered to be de facto segregated. And they're trying to use that to force them to change their zoning laws. And according to this op-ed, which was written by the county executive, evidence of HUD's overreach includes the following unjustified demands: that the county dismantle local zoning laws, a power HUD knows full well the county does not possess, as New York is a home rule state. The specific zoning practices which must be addressed include limitations on the size, type, and number of developments in a community, lot size and density, and the number of bedrooms in a unit, and otherwise all zoning. Communities will be given 90 days to enact changes, and the county is required to take action to counter community opposition. That doesn't sound like representative government either, which of course raises a host of First Amendment issues. So that tied in with a Fox News story, okay, which has quotes from the then Deputy Secretary of HUD, who said, today, this is after the settlement, today we've taken an important step toward building what we call geography of opportunity. He went on to say that at HUD we believe this approach to equitable development can serve as a model for building strong, inclusive, sustainable communities across the United States. A model. The Fox reporter went on to say that officials here in Westchester County are vowing to stand their ground. Meanwhile, the Obama administration has made it perfectly clear that the outcome of this battle will resonate across the country. So we read all these things. We became very concerned. And at that point in time, we were encouraging our Board of Selectmen to not sign this because we didn't want to open up our town to possible lawsuits. We can't afford this. And we didn't want the federal government to come in and enforce any kind of zoning changes on our town. I have a copy of the settlement too. And the Regional Planning Commissioner kept saying, this is only, we're just planning, nothing, you can implement as little as much as you like. So perhaps my focus on saying that, you know, we're opening ourselves up to a lawsuit might have missed the mark by, maybe I didn't hit the bullseye, but I was right next to it. As we went through and we read these documents further, we became more insightful as to what the different partners of the Granite State Future are. There's the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. This page is from the Granite State Future document. This is listing what the partners is, and in there it says that they will, they're going to participate on the policy committee and a bunch of other things. And then it says, additionally, NHHFA will assist RPCs in developing housing plans that address existing and future housing needs, assist in the development of impediments to fair housing. Okay? So they're going to assist in creating the impediments of analysis for each regional planning commission. Now, I mentioned before that the National Regional Planning Commission produced an application for this grant. And as part of that application, they had to produce a 25-page narrative. And in that narrative, they mentioned that the NHHFA will provide guidance to the RPCs and ensure integration and consistency with the state analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. So now they're not only saying that they will help create the analysis of impediments, but it is going to ensure integration and consistency with the document that's been previously written, which Eileen and I obtained, and we went through. And it references on another page of the narrative the 2010 Analysis of Impediments to Fair Housing Choice. It's a recognized intermediary between state efforts and local governments, and the NHHFA is uniquely poised to lead planning effort through the RPSD to promote alternative land use development practices that will alleviate impediments to fair housing. Alleviate impediments. Now you have to understand that when someone writes the analysis of impediments, this is something that becomes, through their eyes, what an impediment might be. And if whoever is writing that has their own agenda that they wish to pursue, that becomes part of the planning process. Now the NHHFA, for the 2010 New Hampshire Analysis of Impediments, they hired the NHLA, the New Hampshire Legal Assistance Organization. Now, the New Hampshire Legal Assistance Organization wrote that 2010 Analysis of Impediments, which is going to be consistently incorporated into all of the regional planning commissions, but they are also the organization that was behind the emphasis, or the impetus behind the workforce housing law that we now have in this state. And they have also successfully sued municipalities for lack of conformance for fair housing under the Fair Housing Act. So you've got an organization who's been bringing litigation under nonconformance to the Fair Housing Act, who are now in the process who are now put in a position of writing what the impediments are to fair housing, and they can push the envelope on that and make it be almost anything. They say that if you have 2-acre zoning, that's an impediment to fair housing. If you have 55 and over communities, but you don't have certain amenities in those communities, that's an impediment to families with children. What else was there, Eileen?
Well, just that they are, what they have done for age 55 housing in certain areas is that if you don't have significant amenities for the elderly, then it's in violation of the Fair Housing Act, and they've decertified the age 55 housing, and then anyone can live there.
Right. So we've got the analysis of impediments to fair housing choice in New Hampshire. Again, all these things that I'm reading, these aren't my words. These are their words, and all these things are part of the legally binding agreements. And as I went through this, you know, it talks about, to my surprise, New Hampshire is a recipient of HUD funding and is therefore required to document that it is engaged in efforts to affirmatively further fair housing. U.S. v. Westchester County. A recent federal court case makes it clear that these obligations are to be taken very seriously and that local and state government officials can no longer gloss over the civil rights certifications they execute when accepting federal community and housing development funds. Westchester County, New York was successfully sued by the United States and a housing discrimination organization under the Federal False Claims Act, alleging that the county had falsely certified it was engaged in activities that affirmatively furthered fair housing. When I spoke with the with the chief of staff of the county executive, he told me that the lawsuit was settled because there was concern that they would be liable for $150 million, and the previous county executive wanted to settle, but that he felt there was no basis for the lawsuit. This housing discrimination organization that they're referring to, this was started by a single individual. He had $29,000 in the organization's bank account. As soon as he brought the lawsuit, HUD stepped in, took it over for him. HUD then prosecuted, worked out the settlement, and then this organization got over $7 million as their involvement in the lawsuit. I'm concerned there's going to be a cottage industry of these organizations springing up all over the country. Now, I mentioned that Westchester County was 70% Caucasian. In New Hampshire, we're over 95, 96% Caucasian. All these organizations do is they look at demographics and they say that represents de facto segregation. That's all they did. So it references in here that it references, you know, that New Hampshire Legal Assistance has produced the AI under contract with the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. It talks about opportunity areas. Opportunity areas are areas where they will look at demographic data and they will find reasons to say that you're not conforming to the Fair Housing Act. There's another thing in here that talks about Westchester County, New York. That case resulted in a clear message that state and local governments are to take meaningful steps to affirmatively further fair housing when they accept federal housing and community development dollars. Talks about the 4 authors of the document. All 4 are part of NHLA. One of the guys, it says, is right behind the workforce housing law. And so, you know, going through all this stuff, it just raised our concerns as to, you know, what is this really about? And it's not about anything other than a redistribution of wealth program. It's a huge, massive welfare program. It's a new form of entitlement program. And they talk about an emphasis on compact housing and changing zoning laws to have mixed-use housing. Mixed use meaning businesses on the bottom and apartments on the top. There is an enormous emphasis on reducing vehicle miles traveled. In fact, that's a mandate, reducing vehicle miles traveled. And when we talked before about metrics, it says in their legally binding agreements, you have to have ways to measure these things. And vehicle miles traveled being reduced is one of the metrics. There's a few other things in here that were legally binding or that were mandatory outcomes. One of the mandatory outcomes is align federal planning and investment resources that mirror the local and regional strategies for achieving sustainable communities. So the federal plans and the local plans have to be aligned. Now, for the most part, the federal plans are already written. So which one's going to give way? It talks about increased participation in decision-making and developing and implementing a long-range vision for the region by populations traditionally marginalized in public planning processes, reduced social and economic disparities for the low-income, minority communities, and other disadvantaged populations within the target region. So it goes on and on and on, and it winds up that this, when you talk about some of the partners, that it winds up being more of social engineering. I just want to talk about two of the partners, and then I'll turn it over to Eileen. One of them is HEAL, New Hampshire. Now, HEAL, New Hampshire, HEAL stands for Healthy Eating, Active Living. Now, if you read their document, which is hundreds of pages long, I did a search in that PDF for vegetables, and it came up with one hit. It's not about healthy eating and active living. It's social engineering. The document is the 2012 Livable Walkable Communities Toolkit, and you see that document, as I said, is about social engineering. The document describes how zoning laws need to be changed so that people have an opportunity to live in mixed-use, high-density, compact housing, and so that every town will then conform to the Fair Housing Act, according to the 2010 New Hampshire Analysis of Impediments. Now, another partner is Action Media. Now, this is a PR firm that's hired to sell this program to people. Now, Action Media, on their website, on the front page, it's a firm that says that it, quote, provides communications for positive social change. They have a link called Get Results, and on that link, it states, our client's work is about power, how our resources used, and who gets to decide. Our work is about the power of communications to shift the advantage, to mobilize support, and neutralize opposition. So my government, with my tax dollars, our tax dollars, has hired a PR firm to neutralize our opposition. Kind of goes against First Amendment. So the inclusion of Action Media as a partner elevated my concerns tremendously. And it led me to question, why would our government enable our tax dollars to be used to neutralize any opposition that we, the people, may have? Because ultimately, who serves who? Who's supposed to serve who? So that concern was strengthened further when we read in the grant application document in a section on page 15 in the section titled Strategy to Address Barriers and Incorporate Existing Plans. In that section, it acknowledges, quote, anticipated barriers include New Hampshire's strong tradition of individual property rights and resultant resistance to planning and zoning. You got that? I hope you don't mind. I want to read that again. Anticipated barriers include New Hampshire's strong tradition of individual property rights and resultant resistance to planning and zoning. Okay? The proposed solution in that same section to overcome our strong tradition of property rights and resultant resistance is to bring this issue to one of their committees, whose members include the DOT, DES, and OEP. This committee will, quote, work together to identify potential statewide strategies for reducing and/or eliminating the barriers. Okay? So the barrier is our planning, is our property rights, and they will work together to find ways to reduce or eliminate that barrier. So I just want to end by saying that James Madison warned us that liberty and property are inseparable. You can't have one without the other. And the other statement that I want to quote before I leave is one that's made by Karl Marx. And as I read through all of these legally binding documents, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages, I kept saying to myself, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. And that's what this plan is about. And if anybody approves this, with all due respect, because this is your decision to make, but if anybody approves this, they do not have, in my humble opinion, the interests of their town, their families, their town, our state, and our country at heart. This is a program that is being implemented across our country to those towns that willingly sign on. And don't buy into the fact that it's only a planning document. We are going to turn over, via this plan, all sorts of data, all sorts of demographic data, resource data, demographic data, to our federal government. Our federal government, okay? These are the people that implemented, different programs against the wishes of the people. Now, I don't want to sound alarmist, but does anybody, do people realize that our government is flying drones in our country right now? Do you realize that?
Oh, sure.
Do you know how many drones they plan to be flying in our country within 10 years?
30,000.
30,000. 30,000 drones. This is the same government that we're going to be turning over data of our most precious resources. Do we trust them to do the right thing with that, or do we trust them to turn around and then implement those plans? And these plans are not in the mindset and in the framework of a constitutional republic. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come up and talk. I very much appreciate it. I hope I was helpful.
We appreciate you coming and giving us this information. Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
What was the color and size of the carrot they dangled in front of Wyndham?
You want to know something? This is what ultimately, we had two people who are, it was 2 and 2. Okay, we had two people who are very liberal in nature, and we have two other people who are very conservative. And we're concerned about taking the HUD funds, being tied to HUD, having HUD be involved in this program. It wasn't just HUD funds, okay? Because that's how it was spun by the planning commissions. Well, you shouldn't be afraid of HUD funds because HUD's involved with your, redoing your roads and all these other types of programs that you've taken HUD money from. That's not the point. The point is that this goes far beyond a land use planning and resource program. And the carrot, there were 2 carrots. One was, you'll get a seat at the table. So our selectmen said, well, okay, well, that's cool, so we'll have more of a say. Well, if you read this documentation, there's no guarantee that you sign that document that you'll have a seat at the table. It says it right in their documentation. In fact, most of these committees are already formed. There's no more room on them. You have no say on who goes onto those committees. It says it in their documentation. The other carrot is, if you are part of this program, you will get some kind of special status, so you get 2 more points on your grant application if you apply for a federal grant at some point in the future. So for those 2 beans, okay, Jack got 3. We only got 2 beans, 2 points. That's what they signed on for, a seat at the table, which they have no guarantee of getting, and they can have anyway, even if they don't sign the document. It was clearly stated to our selectmen, although our selectmen were looking to get, a seat at one of the committees, of which there's no guarantee. And in another planning board meeting, which I watched online, they were told it doesn't make any difference. You can participate either way. So there's a lot of inconsistencies as to what's being said by the planning commissions, and the person who was there, the representative, he changed what he said from time to time to time. He was asked directly in the second meeting that they were making a presentation, would we, Windham, be bound by these legally binding agreements, as becoming part of this Granite State Future program with HUD? And the answer was yes. When they came back the third time, when they were going to do the vote, the answer was, oh no, you won't, no. That's just the planning commissions. That has nothing to do with the towns. So I've asked several attorneys to take a look at it. I haven't heard back from them yet, because I want to know who's lying. And I actually think, as a state rep, sir, one of the things I'm going to ask is that we have laws enacted so that if representatives on any level lie to the people, they need to be held accountable. Because we can't lie to the FBI, we can't lie to the police. That's a crime. It should go the other way too. So that's all I have to say, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Sounds like a gerrymandering attempt to me.
It does. It does.
Redistributing the votes.
Mr. Chairman, do we know who appoints the equity team and the people on it?
Well, we don't. The towns will not have any say.
The equity team is meeting in 2 days. It's already been put together. It's online on the National and Regional Planning Commission, who's on that team.
How were they chosen? Did they?
By the National and Regional Planning Commission. There was no vote. They were chosen.
And they picked them out of a hat, or they went to their house? How did the process work?
They chose based on a variety of different organizations that would be interested in being on such a committee.
Right.
Chairman, a question. For a town that does not sign on to this, what are the repercussions going to be?
Well, it's my understanding that they're going to produce a regional plan as well. They'll produce it either way. My concern, from my perspective, from my town, is that if you participate in this, you become complicit with that. And that analysis of impediments, I truly believe, from all the research that Eileen and I have done, will come back and haunt you when they turn around and implement this. That is a huge thing. They are pushing for equity on every level. And I'm talking about, they talk about health equity. Health equity.
They don't talk about equal access to housing. They talk about equal housing or equal quality housing.
They talk about equal outcomes, not equal opportunity.
Karl Marx, all right.
And it's frightening.
Okay. My question was, what happens to a town that does not sign on to
Nothing.
this program?
They still get
Nothing.
a vote at the final vote of the regional
You do.
commission.
And you can still participate through the Regional Planning Commission, if you choose to.
Is there a plan to come after those towns?
No.
And force them somehow into this?
They will tell you no.
Can I talk to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, on the 19th, I attended a Granite State Future meeting put on by the Stratford Regional Planning Commission. At that meeting was Mike Goldberg, who was the Action Media's representative, who was essentially running the meeting. There was Cynthia Copeland, who is the executive director of the Stratford Regional Planning Commission, and who was the deputy mayor from Rochester. Rochester brought up that exact question and said, hey, we've got a whole new plan about a year ago, a master plan. What do we need to go through this all over again? And there was also a gentleman there by the name of Scruton. What's his first name? John Scruton, and he is the town administrator in Barrington. He piped up and supplied the answer. He said, If you don't go, if you don't join, we'll just do it without you.